Pastoring in the digital age is not easy. It's likely that historians will name 2007 as a key inflection point in human history. That's the year that Steve Jobs released the iPhone into the wild. And it was a before-after moment for the church in the West. In hindsight, many of us uncritically adopted technologies like the smartphone or social media without knowing just how these new tools were designed to malform our soul. It was also new that we missed a chance to pastor people into an alternative future. Now we're seeing the emergence of AI, and we think right now might be a 2007 moment for artificial intelligence. We do not know the future, but we want to learn from our mistakes in the past so we can thoughtfully pastor people in the digital age. To that end, we've created a conversation between two trusted guides. My friend Jay Kim is the pastor of Westgate Church in Silicon Valley, serving on the bleeding edge of the AI revolution. And Andy Crouch is a partner with Praxis in New York City, author and public intellectual. We've asked them to offer historical context, ancient Christian wisdom, and just practical advice on pastoring the church into the next era of the digital age. Enjoy their conversation.
Andy, it is so good to be back with you. It's been too long since you and I have been together. I'm a pastor in the Silicon Valley. You work with entrepreneurs, many of whom work in technological spaces. And so in different ways and similar ways, you and I think, are both deeply aware of how quickly just how quickly artificial intelligence is changing and evolving and expanding, but also how quickly the conversations about AI are evolving and moving. And there are so many lenses through which we can have a conversation about AI. But for our purposes today, to be as helpful pastorally as we can to people, we want to look through the lens of practical pastoral thoughts on how followers of Jesus might consider not just our engagement with AI, but how we might even think about AI. So, our belief is that the life of discipleship is to be with Jesus, is to become like Jesus in all of life. So we want to ask questions about what sort of obstacles and opportunities are there for followers of Jesus when it comes to being with him and becoming like him at the intersection of these new technologies. But I want to lay the groundwork a little bit before we get into some of the practical pastoral implications. Let's just talk about what is it that we're talking about when we talk about AI? Let's just start there.
Yes.
What are we talking about when we talk about AI? And then maybe more importantly, why? Why are we talking about AI?
Yeah.
Isn't it just another technology? We've kind of been through this before. So what is it? And then why are we talking about it?
Yeah. Let me try to set the stage by going way back and just starting with tools, that human beings have always had tools. And the Greek word techne, that we get all this language of technology from, originally refers to the craft of kind of making and using tools. And this goes as far back as the human story goes back. So we've always had tools. About 100-ish years ago, 150 years ago, you might date this to the steam engine in some ways, we develop a new kind of thing. We initially call them machines. I think the best broad word is devices, which is things that, unlike tools, sort of operate on their own. That is, they actually can do things for us without us, or without us or being very involved. So tools always require a human being to be using skill and knowledge and attention. I mean, woe to you, even with a tool as simple as a hammer. Yeah. If you're not paying attention, you're going to hit your thumb, you're going to miss the target. It actually requires a surprising amount of skill to hammer things, right? So tools require human engagement, skill, presence, attention, power, even literal, where do they get their energy from? They get their energy from human bodies. Mm-hmm. Devices sort of change the game in a pretty amazing way. They often have autonomous sources of power. That is, they can power themselves. They have these things called cybernetic feedback loops that allow them to sort of regulate their own response to the environment. So you go from a hammer to a nail gun, and a human being may still be sort of involved, but way less skill is required, way less kind of human development is required, and it's way more effective. Like you can get a whole roof done with minimal like physical effort and much less skill actually than if you had to do a roof with a hammer.
Yeah.
So I would say that's really when we start to have what we call technology. And part of the reason I say that is that's when we start actually using a word. We make up this word technology that feels different from tools. That's like layer 2. Layer 3 is the digital. We, in the second half of the 20th century, partly through information theory, partly through these inventions like transistors, the most important one, we start to be able to build these new kind of devices that aren't just electrical, but electronic, that actually don't just operate in the physical world the way the steam engine did, but operate in the world of information through binary encoding of information. And the digital world appears, and we quickly discover that the best way for us to interact with that world is through screens. So on top of the digital, we get eventually screens, not that much longer after digital. And now arrives the next kind of element in the stack. And we're calling it AI. And we've been calling it that for a long time, by the way. It's just that it kept not really working out. So AI was a dream. As soon as people started building computers, they thought, well, can these things become as intelligent as people? And in the 1950s and 60s, people were asking that question and doing thought experiments. The Turing test, for example, could you have a human being in one room, a computer in the other room, and have messages go back and forth, and you wouldn't be able to tell if it was a computer or a person in the other room? Right. That comes from the 1950s. They're already thinking, like, how might we take these computational systems and turn them into something like intelligence? And we kept having what they called AI winters, which is you'd have like spring where everything's growing and you're thinking this is going to be amazing. Then you'd have a very short summer and then it would totally not work out. And you'd go into this long period called AI winter where it just seems like, computers are getting better and better at some things, but they're not getting better and better at the things that matter most to human beings. For whatever reason, well, for a couple interesting reasons, in the last 5 years as we speak, there's been this takeoff again of capabilities. We uncovered actually a simpler way of building these systems than we had before. We used to think you sort of had to tell the computers how to be intelligent. We then invented this extremely simple set of mathematics, vector mathematics, and we just set these computational systems loose on trillions of bytes of data. I mean, trillions of bytes, like all the data we could find for them to ingest, and we just let them train themselves. And something has emerged from this that has 3 qualities now and 1 that might be coming. So this new kind of AI is better at interacting with culture and language than computers have ever been. So computers have historically been pretty terrible at language. You used to have to learn programming languages, right, to interact with computers. And we built a bunch of layers on top of that to make it easier for the average user. But underneath, the computer really did not know what was going on linguistically. These systems really get language. Like they really know how to interact the way we interact in language. And they get culture, which in many ways is built on language because they've ingested everything we've ever been able to put into words and ended up on the internet, they've ingested. So cultural linguistic fluency is genuinely new. Sort of following from that, these systems actually have, you could say, emotional and relational intelligence, not in the way a person does. They're not persons at all, but they are able to sense and respond to emotion and relationship in a way that computers never did. I have joked sometimes that Siri, the Apple assistant, barely knows that I am married. So I'm married to Catherine. But when I say, send a, say, I don't want to say it because there might be a device on it. Hey, you know who? Send a message to Catherine. Like half the time it pops up my wife, who is obviously the Catherine. Half the time it's some random Catherine in my address book, barely knows I'm married. Well, the new generation of AI will absolutely be able to keep track of who's most important to you. What does it mean to be married? What does it mean to have a spouse? All those things are within its kind of grasp, computationally, you might say. That's new. On the top of these 2 things, cultural linguistic fluency and relational and emotional fluency, by which I don't mean they're themselves.
Right, they're not people.
They're not people. They're just amazing computational systems that have ingested all this and can interact with it. The third thing that now they're able to do, and these capabilities are growing every day, is I would say simulation power or simulation fluency. They are able to simulate experiences that we've never been able to simulate before. And because this basic vector math technique works with language, it works with video and image, they can make, as we sit here, they've just been able to make 8-second short films. Yeah. Surely by the time anyone watches this, it'll be 16 seconds, then it'll be 32 seconds, it'll keep growing. And they're able to simulate for you things that have never been, you've only been able to experience them in the real world. Mm-hmm. So the fourth thing that might be next, and that I think is worth assuming is coming, is could they conquer in a way, could these systems, the same thing that train them in language and images and so forth, and in music and sound, could that apply to moving through the world of space and time the way we do with our bodies? And so this would basically be a breakthrough in robotics. Right now, robots are very limited in what they can do. Mm-hmm. But couldn't we use these same techniques and train physical systems to move through the world? Which could mean that within all of our lifetimes, our world will be just as filled with entities that have a real kind of intelligence and physical spatial fluency, plus relational emotional fluency, plus cultural and linguistic fluency. It'll be like a new category of creatures in our world, very much like dogs and cats or domesticated animals. So we've got these other intelligences that share our homes now, that know things about us and have their own purposes and so forth. If robotics gets solved, and it's like a 50-50 coin flip, whether it can be done or is in fact way harder and not easy to do. Mm-hmm. If it gets solved, then all this stuff that right now is still presented to us through screens or audio interfaces shows up in an embodied form.
Takes on physicality.
And now is with us in the world.
Yeah.
And that's why we're talking about it. Because as impressive as the steam engine was, and impressive as the computer is, and impressive as all the screen stuff is, this is really quite remarkable. And even what we already have is remarkable. And where we can kind of logically or naturally imagine it going is pretty amazing.
I want to dive deeper a little bit there to get to some of the more practical, pragmatic, and pastoral wisdom as we think about as followers of Jesus AI. So if discipleship to Jesus is at least nothing less than being with Jesus, what we might call communion with him, and becoming like him, what we might call formation, being formed into his image, then what sort of disconnecting and deforming potential, you're already sort of teasing it out, what sort of disconnecting and deforming potential does AI hold that, as followers of Jesus, we need to be really thoughtful about before we just open the app on our phones? You've already sort of talked about this. I know I've heard you talk and write quite extensively about what you call the superhero zone, sort of easy everywhere that gets accelerated with artificial intelligence. Yeah. So talk more about that.
All right, a couple things to think about. I think where I want to start, I think we have to take really seriously like what it would mean to be with and be like Jesus with respect to technology by reflecting on a very interesting thing about Jesus of Nazareth, the actual person. Mm-hmm. He lives, first of all, in a barely technological world, nothing like our world. So already we feel actually, if we think about it, quite a bit of gap between
lots of tools.
Oh, tools everywhere, because tools are always there.
Yes.
But technology, in the sense of things that operate kind of free of human skill and engagement, that don't involve a human being kind of exerting themselves and involving themselves in the work of being in the world, and instead that sort of operate quasi-independently. Yeah. Jesus and everyone around him, it's dreamed of at this. It's like been a human dream all along, and Aristotle has dreamed it 300, 400 years before Jesus, right? There are two technologies in Jesus' world that are like that: writing and money. So writing is a form of communication that can float free from the speaker. If this, what we're doing now, face-to-face speech, is the basic form of communication, if I write it down, it sort of wanders off into the world and speaks in a way to those who can read in it without a person, at least without the original speaker having to go. That's an early technology. It's kind of I'd call it a primal technology. The other primal technology is money, which allows the representation of value in human affairs to kind of float free of human care of the earth and harvesting of the good of the earth or finding the resources of the earth. And money can kind of float around. So writing and money are the two primal technologies. They're the first really to show up in the human story. Jesus uses neither one in his whole ministry. Now, we can almost be sure he was literate. All Hebrew boys would have been. He would have read the Hebrew scriptures. But he did not write anything down, ever.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Even though he has writing, there is writing. He has the written text of scripture. And then money, there is money probably involved. We read that women who followed Jesus provided for him out of their own wealth, which meant financial wealth, for his kind of itinerant ministry. And we know that there was a money bag that the disciples kept. We also know who had it.
Yeah.
The least reliable of the apostles, in the end, not an apostle, of the 12, is selected. So, but Jesus himself, when money comes up, like paying taxes to Caesar, he has to ask someone to bring him a denarius. He's like, oh, wait, well, bring me the coin. And then he looks at it as if he's never seen it.
Yeah.
So this person that we want to be with and be like did not even use the technology available to him in a pre-technological time. And this human being, we believe, embodied the fullness of what it is to be human more than anyone who's ever lived. So our apprenticeship to him is going to have to be about learning how it is to be human without even the technologies Jesus had access to.
Okay, what about the pushback, though, that I'm sure you get all the time? It's like, okay, Jesus didn't, but
Paul did.
Yes, all of that, the written word, and it's true. I mean, that's the Bible we hold in our hands or sometimes on our tablets. That's all a result of technology. It is a technology. So how would you respond to that?
It's absolutely true. The first followers of Jesus start making use of the technology available to them. They travel using Roman, in a way, technology, ships or tools, at least ships and roads and so forth. Jesus didn't really, but they do, very intentionally, kind of maximizing in some ways. And they are writing, they are using money. Paul's collecting money for Jerusalem at the point he writes to the Corinthians. So I will say what's notable is they never say, look what this technology is allowing us to do. There's nothing in the New Testament, there's not one moment in the New Testament where someone kind of marvels, isn't it a good thing we're Roman citizens for the sake of the gospel or something like that? Or isn't it great that I can write to you? In fact, what we read is sort of apologies for writing. So the author of the letters of John says, I really long to be with you face to face, but for now I'm writing. Paul sends every letter that, as best we can tell, with a person. So it's not that they didn't use it. It's not that we don't use it. You and I are using it now.
Yep.
It's that it's so secondary to the astonished sense that those first Christians have, that as John says in the prologue to his first letter, that we actually touched and handled and were with the Word made flesh, and we beheld him and were with him. And now we're just using any means we can to invite you into relationship with him because we actually believe he's still available to us. So there's a lack of intoxication with it, a lack of preoccupation with it, and always a recentering. Paul's just received a financial gift from the Philippians. He says, you know what? I don't even seek the gift. I seek the fruit that it's going to bear in the world. He decenters the attention from the technological medium that they're supporting him through and says, but what I care about is the fruit. What I care about is not the writing. It's the connection with you and the desire to be face to face with you.
Yeah, that desire for connection face to face. I think it's such a striking thought, really convicting in many ways, sobering for pastors and church leaders especially. So I hear in my circles amongst church leaders all the time these words. You've written about this word, impact. So let's use the tool, be it whatever social media app of choice, whatever it might be.
Right.
So let's use the tool to maximize our impact. Often it's maximize our reach, which is really interesting to me because that word is like literally taken from the world of social media.
Sure.
What is my reach?
Right.
Is there some sense for church leaders and pastors in particular, but for all of us as followers of Jesus, to reassess or to reconsider this sort of blind infatuation we have with impact and reach? And the reason I'm asking that is because you're right. It is a really convicting thought. When you read the New Testament writers over and over again, they leverage a particular technology, but they seem to insert the sort of desire for human connection.
Yeah.
I'm using the written word, but I so wish I was with you.
Yes.
You know, and
Yes.
there's an utter lack of that when I'm thinking about just reach,
Just
impact,
sheer
get the
scale.
content out there.
Yes.
Yeah, comment on that a little bit.
It's just totally orthogonal to the project that the kingdom is on, which is the relational reconstitution of human beings who have lost their ability to love in the fullness of who they are. And for that to be restored is not going to happen through any kind of scale technique or any kind of productivity breakthrough.
Yeah.
It's going to happen through the sort of extraordinary effect of this one life lived wholly without scale and amplification techniques, and yet with such resonance that the whole rest of history reshapes itself because of what that life is like.
Yeah.
And because in succeeding generations, people, because of that life, are going to say, I want to know him. I want to become like him. I want to be with him. And in fact, through his spirit, it's possible to become like him and be with him.
Yeah.
So it's not that all this stuff is not helpful. It's just not relevant to the project of becoming like Jesus. Except you a little bit ago asked this question, is it somehow distorting or deforming?
Yep.
And the answer is yes, profoundly, if what we do is we start to think, you know what this is about is my finally being free of the burden of being human. And being human involves all this work, all this suffering, all this sometimes fairly tedious toil mostly in the service of others. What if I could just get away from all that? What if the robots will show up and do the dishes for me? So I no longer, now at one level, that's one less chore to do around the house. In another way, why do I do the dishes? To serve the people that I live with and to keep a home that is kind of dignified and not full of dirty dishes.
Maybe the distortion, what I'm hearing you say is the distortion is that we've sort of divided that to be human is to fully experience human pleasure without human pain, right? That's the divide. Wow. That's what technology we think can do for us.
Yeah.
So AI already in its early stages seems to be doing some things that were once reserved for humans, you know?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Pastoral care, spiritual direction. There are people that I know who go to chatbots for pastoral care, spiritual direction, certainly like biblical theology questions, like this huge rise of people going to AI for therapy and counseling. So talk about that. Like, what are we risking when we sort of make it this element that was once reserved for human beings?
Well, the very broadest way I would think about how to approach AI is there will be things for which it is useful, because really all technology is designed to kind of increase the available usefulness of the world to us. And I fully believe, and we've already seen, we could list numerous ways that even already this basic set of techniques that have been so fruitful in the last few years have become incredibly useful, and they will continue to be. And there are things that people have sought from other people that fall in the realm of usefulness. It's useful to know what a word means when you don't know the word. Sure. And you could ask someone, or if you have a dictionary, you could look it up. Or now you can ask AI, right? And so in that sense, if what you're looking for is information, if what you're looking for is very basic kind of building block techniques to interact with the world, how do I make an omelet?
Yeah.
How do I mean, you could apprentice yourself to a chef, and you could probably learn some things from a true chef about an omelet that AI will have a hard time teaching you. But for you and me, let's say, who don't aspire, let's say, to be truly great chefs, we just need to turn the eggs into something edible. I bet AI will be able to teach you all kinds of useful things like that, right? How does that apply to the spiritual life? Well, the spiritual life and let's say the life of spiritual and emotional growth, there are some technique things that if you just know them, it really helps. There are better and worse ways to have a conflict with your spouse. And there are things you can say and things you can not say that if you just literally know, like, hey, it's probably better if you don't do this thing, and it's better if you say this thing or open up a question this way. I completely believe that AI today, let alone as it gets better, can help you with those things. So, if what you need is information or what you need is techniques, AI will be better than Google at that. Already is. And may well be better than the nearest available person who may have a lot to get done, like your pastor. Yeah. So your pastor may be glad you asked AI rather than asking your pastor. When we start talking about the deep work of, let's call it therapy, kind of which is really to heal the human self, especially in its interiority, not so much the therapy of the body, which is medicine, but the soul and emotions and the heart and the mind. I'm concerned that that is not something that is just a matter of information and techniques. Yes, those are part of it. And to the extent that information and techniques are part of a good kind of counseling practice, AI could absolutely do some of that. But what we all come into the world with, our pain, our trauma, our need for healing, what we all require coming into the world with that is someone who will be with us in, I think, three things: our fear, our guilt, and our shame. And these, I don't choose these at random. They also actually ramify up into whole cultural systems. There are cultures that are built around fear and the relief of fear. There are cultures that are built around guilt and the relief of guilt. And there are cultures built around shame and the relief of shame. And these are also psychological dynamics at the level of the individual. And what I need when I am afraid is I need someone who can give me trust that I'm not alone in what I'm afraid of. What I need when I feel guilt is someone to tell me, yes, you have sinned, but your guilt is covered and you're forgiven. What I need when I feel shame is someone who sees what I'm afraid to disclose and gives me love and says, you are nonetheless, yes, I see it, but you are still completely loved. That is a personal encounter that lifts the burden of fear and guilt and shame. And AI will be able to simulate that. Of course it can simulate it. It's got it in its training data. Yeah. It can say the words, you're forgiven, though if you set it up with the right prompt, it can also be the ultimate accuser and chase you around with your failings as long as you want. Like it can be the ultimate sadist, in other words. It's indifferent. It's all in just how the prompt was set up, how the reinforcement learning through human feedback was set up. Now, of course, all these commercial interfaces have been trained to be very nice and very, and of course they'll tell you you're forgiven, but there's no reason they have to. They could just as persuasively tell you you're condemned for the rest of your life. Only a person can hear what you have to share, your fear, your guilt, your shame, absorb it, suffer it with you, and then offer back, if that person is in touch with the Spirit of Jesus Christ, offer you trust and forgiveness and love. And in that sense, it's a disaster if people chase after a simulation of the thing that God has given to his, if you want to think about specifically the forgiveness of sins, has entrusted to his church to proclaim to people with authority in heaven and on earth that your sins are forgiven. To go to a chatbot that will either directly or indirectly try to convey to you a sense of reassurance that your sins are not that big a deal, or that, oh, it's all okay now, or here's some techniques for getting beyond your feelings of guilt. Like, we cannot allow that to be outsourced, but people will absolutely prefer the sort of low risk, low engagement, low formation way of receiving that kind of minimal assurance, rather than the very risky thing of confessing your sins to one another that you may be healed. Do you see the gap there?
Yeah.
Like, it's a gulf.
Yeah.
But most people will stay on the side of that gulf that is safe. And the problem with all of these relational simulators that AI is able to spin up, even though it can do all kinds of other things, it can fold proteins for you all day. It can explore the space of available petrochemical substitutes. Like, it can do all this useful stuff. But instead, what we're going to want it to do is behave like a person and make me feel safe, so that I can ask you all the questions that I'm too afraid to ask a real person. But then I'll receive from you, the simulated system, an assurance that is not real, is not personal, will not be with me in my dying moment, will not help me care for a little baby. We're missing out on the formation as persons who can actually redeem, be agents of God's redemption in the world and agents of reconciliation. This is the stakes for me.
Yeah, man. I think there's a writer, Kurt Thompson, the Christian psychologist, who said, every person enters the world looking for someone looking for them. And as you're talking, it strikes me, one of the dangers, but also one of the lenses that followers of Jesus can always sort of look through to consider any technology, especially AI, is one, it can make you feel like it's looking for you and at you.
Yes.
But to remind yourself, it's not really seeing you in any real human way. It's based on a lot of your prompts. It's based on its own sort of learning models and this immense wealth of information data that it has that is simulating a sort of human experience. But to remind ourselves that, one of the thoughts that comes to mind.
Can I just?
Yeah, please jump in. Yeah,
I think it's really important to almost finish that thought, but we're gonna lose something else. What it is the ultimate mirror. If I look in a mirror, there's someone looking for me. Looking for me.
Yes.
It's like the Zoom phenomenon. Like, which box do you look at when you're on Zoom? You look at you.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a mirror, and it's not just a mirror of you. It's a mirror of human culture. It's like the perfect reflection of everything human beings ever done. But all it is a mirror. It's as inert as a mirror. It's as featureless as a mirror, and it is as predictable as a mirror. It will never be to you what you need, which is another person who is not you. Like, when I'm looking at you now, we're having a conversation. It's vulnerable in certain ways, partly because we know other people are going to listen and watch, right? And if you're just a mirror, then ultimately all I've got are my own resources, my own strengths, my own weaknesses, my own vulnerabilities. They're all just being reflected. But if you are actually with me in this hard thing that we're doing, and you are, and I can feel it, and it's not just me reflecting, that is real strength to do something hard. That's what we have to have. And AI will either be literally in the sense that it responds to the user's inputs with such fidelity, it'll be an amazing mirror of the person. But even at its best, in a way, its most amazing capabilities, it's just a mirror of all of human culture.
Yeah.
But Jesus comes into the world and God intervenes in history so that culture isn't just a mirror, and history isn't just a series of reflections like a hall of mirrors. It's actually the inbreaking of something truly new. And someone truly new who can look at us in a new way and say, I love you. I'm going to restore you. I'm going to take you to somewhere you've never been as a culture or as a human race since the fall. That's what we need.
Mirrors are super predictable. In many ways, it's very predictable. I look, I move, I say particular things, and it reflects back. And you just said, Jesus, his inbreaking is the reality of someone, a person, and people. Not my reflection in a mirror, but you and I right now. We've talked about this conversation. We've emailed, like you said, but I don't totally know what you're going to say.
Exactly.
And you don't totally know what I'm going to ask. And there is a certain level of risk. There is a certain level of nerves and resistance, right? This would be very easy if it was just a scripted, if you were an AI and we had just scripted out and you were some simulation, but it's not. Like, I don't quite know how you're going to respond to this very question. And it strikes me the way you're talking about it. maybe some of it for followers of Jesus is AI dangerously becomes this sort of tangible version of our misunderstanding of what we sort of think maybe God should be like. So we read in Hebrews or wherever, like, he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we misunderstand the text to mean he is really just this ultimate magical machine in the cosmic sphere somewhere that I input and he gives me whatever data, answer, blessing, provision that I'm looking for. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's immediate, sometimes it's never. And that's when I'm really questioning, does he love me? Is he for me? Does he see me? But there is an unpredictability, just like there is with any person, there is an unpredictability with God. Him being the same yesterday, today, and forever doesn't mean he's void of personality and his own thoughts and will. Obviously, he has all of those things. And that can be really frightening. Whereas AI is like not as scary. But it does the godlike things. You know, it knows everything. It has this sort of like omniscience to it, or so we think. So talk a little bit about that. Like it feels a little bit like, and I want to, in a moment, I want to get really specific about practices, you know, how we can be formed into Christ-likeness, but talk about sort of like the sacred unpredictability of God and why we, especially in an age of AI, we need to remind ourselves and learn to trust and lean into that reality more and more.
Here's one way to think about it. These LLMs, large language models, are basically taking all the data they've ingested, and they are navigating a non-deterministic, so there's some randomness in it, but they're navigating a probability pathway along a series of tokens. In the case of language, it's kind of basically words. You can think of it as like what word most likely follows the next. And they are following more or less the most probable path through what you would naturally say at a given moment with a given topic on the table. And they've, of course, been giving all these prompts, and that's all part of their, what we call their context window, right? But in the end, the next thing you get from an AI as it's spitting out words is the most probable. Contrast this to Jesus. In the course of Jesus' ministry, people come to him with all kinds of questions, all kinds of requests, lots of interesting topics. There is one time when they ask him a question and Jesus gives the expected answer. One time. What is the greatest commandment? Jesus answers that the way every rabbi then and now would answer with the Shema Yisrael, except there's two things he does. First of all, the Shema Yisrael has three terms. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, and strength, let's say, or heart and mind and strength. Three things. When Jesus answers, he has four. So this is like adding a verse to the Star Spangled Banner, or it's like it's taking the phrase every faithful Jew repeats every morning when he gets up. Jesus changes it. Okay, so even the expected answer, he gives an expanded answer, which is heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then he adds, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then he has the sort of gall to say, that's the greatest commandment. Those two are the greatest, right? So now that's Jesus at his most predictable. Every other time Jesus is asked a question, well, first of all, 90% of the time I venture to say he does not answer in the conventional sense. He asks another question. He tells a story. Who is my neighbor? Oh, well, let me tell you. You know, this is, he is, if you think of, you know, what we call the normal distribution as a bell curve, right? The probability distribution, like AI will always sit in the middle of the bell curve of what's most probable to be said about any topic. This is why AI is like the greatest cliche generator. In fact, as a bonus observation here, if you're a writer or a preacher and you want to find out the normal thing to say about a topic, ask AI what it is. And then don't say that because everyone's heard that thing already. That's cliche, okay? Jesus is like the opposite of that. He never is in the middle of the bell curve. He's way out on the edge of the distribution. No one, I defy anyone to read through the Gospels, look at every question put to Jesus, and then if you did not already know because you're a good Bible reader, try to guess what he says next. You'll never guess. With AI, it's always guessing based on all the data it's accumulated. This is the most fundamental difference. And in the end, this is because Jesus is the most alive person who's ever lived because he is the son of the living God. The living God never repeats himself, is not a mechanism that just kind of rehearses things.
Yep.
God is always opening up new possibility. And Jesus, as a human being, was the most creative conversation partner you could imagine because he never says what you'd expect.
Immense risk talking to Jesus.
I mean, I don't really recommend asking him a question unless you really want your life to be turned upside down because his answer is going to take you somewhere you didn't know there even was to go.
Yes.
That's one side. Now, the other thing so that's Jesus in the flesh. Now, Jesus now ascended. His spirit is now with us. But how does he relate to us? It's so different from a chatbot. So the moment you ask a chatbot a question, it gets to work answering it. And it usually does so fairly quickly. Now, there's some new deep research techniques that take a little bit of time, but it's mostly amazing how fast and how complete. And of course, we think, well, this is great for studying the Bible. Like if I run into a question about the Bible, I can just ask and AI will quickly answer, right? And yet, this is not how God operates with us in prayer.
Yeah.
How often, maybe you are a different kind of prayer than I am. But in your prayer life, how often do you ask God a question and immediately like a full multiple paragraphs, well formatted appear in your mind or I don't know?
Yeah.
Never?
Right. Never.
Never. I won't speak for you. For me, how often anything that I address to God in prayer, do I get back a palpable response that I'm even sure I was heard?
Mm-hmm.
I can count on one hand the times in my life when God did speak in that way in my heart, and I was like, oh my goodness, I have just been addressed by God. I will say that we won't go into the details now for time, that every time it was an answer I couldn't have made up myself, did not expect, often quite challenging, also full of love and grace. But most of the time, when I offer something up to God in prayer, I get back silence. I'm waiting. And AI doesn't make you wait.
Yeah.
And it gives you an answer. Whereas I think part of relating to God is really the deep realization, he is truly other from me. He is absolutely for me, but the path to him will not be done on my terms, based on my kind of how I'd like to navigate and the sequence I'd like to go through. Like, he's doing something different in my life that's real and I can look back on and be quite confident was real. But it's not this sort of fluent conversation that AI trains us to expect, or fluent exchange of answers about problems that we have, including with the text. Your experience with the Bible should be perplexity.
Yes.
You should get to points and just be like, I really do not know what is happening at this moment, and let alone what it means for me. And if you can turn to a system that will always give you some kind of explanation, you are missing out on the dependence on God that the word is meant to stop you in your tracks.
Yeah.
And have you say, what in the world, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. What in the world can that mean? You can plug that into AI and it'll give you kind of a middle of the bell curve summation of all the different things Christians have said about it, which may well alleviate your anxiety about what it means, but will not at all answer the question of why in the world does Jesus say, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect.
It makes me more informed. It does very little to form me.
Indeed, may unform, may deform, may undo the formative process of realizing that, we don't live by bread alone. We live by every word that comes from the mouth of God. And this is precious stuff that we can't just control or fix or figure out.
Yeah. Keep going down this line with maybe other spiritual practices. Let's talk about solitude, right? I mean, there's kind of an obvious one, but there's a lot to say here.
Well, I have been thinking a lot about the just consistent tradition of the consistent witness of the tradition that solitude, silence, and fasting are the elemental spiritual disciplines. They are the alloys you need in your life to strengthen you to be on the way of being like Jesus. And how beautifully irrelevant AI is to all three. So solitude, AI wants to be your companion.
Yeah.
There are wonderful, well-intentioned brothers and sisters in Christ creating spiritual companion apps that will go with you in your quiet time and, will talk to you about how your quiet time is going and read scripture aloud to you and, hey, Jay, how are you feeling about God? And they'll be there with you. And that means you will be completely forfeiting the first elemental piece of the true spiritual life, which is the courage to be alone without another present, without the certainty that God is present, because who of us truly can say we know for sure that God is there in that empty place of aloneness? And yet that place, without the companion, without the helpful friend, is where you will somehow develop a hunger for the presence of God that somehow God will not overlook and will care for you in it.
Yeah.
Silence. Silence is not the absence of sound, because outside of an anechoic chamber or something,
Yeah.
I mean, there's sound around us.
Yeah.
Silence is the relinquishing of the need for communication.
Mm.
And we're not going to do it right now because it strangely cannot be mediated. So you and I, if we were not filming, could reasonably comfortably, especially if we know and trust each other, sit together in many, many seconds, even minutes of silence, and know that we're together, but not have to be like exchanging words. Now, for interesting reasons, in audio and video, it doesn't work. It would be boring and strange, and we won't subject anyone to it. AI doesn't want to be silent. AI can't be silent because it is mediated intrinsically. And so if you carry AI with you, you are missing out on learning how to not need to speak to God, and strangely, how not to require God to speak to you. Mother Teresa, who's now Saint Teresa of Calcutta, was asked by this broadcast TV interviewer about her prayer life. And she said, and this gentleman said, well, so what do you say to God when you pray? And she said, oh, I mostly don't say anything, I listen. And he found this a very uncomfortable answer. And so he immediately follows up, he's like, well, what does God say? And she said, oh, he mostly listens.
Yeah. And then she says, if you don't understand that, I don't know how to explain it to you.
Wow.
This is fascinating.
Wow.
Right, which makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
You just sort of have to live in the absence to understand it.
So she knew what silence was.
Yeah.
AI can't help you.
Yeah.
It only works when you talk to it. And then you've broken the solitude, you've broken the silence, then fasting. I mean, it's not gonna, it doesn't need food. It can't be food. It's orthogonal, right? This is why I say this stuff is orthogonal to the real thing.
Yeah.
That are, I think, the true alloys. Like, these are kind of the elements we need to build into our lives that then make us truly available, that when we do have to speak, or when we do have to act in the world, when AI can become very useful to us, getting stuff done, just like all technology can be, we will have something worth offering to the world. Once you have something worth offering, technology is amazing for making it available and doing it at a cost that makes it possible to do it, at scale or whatever. That's great. But how do you become the kind of person who has something worth offering? That's what technology generally, from the devices on up, is not very helpful for.
Talk a bit about community. There's a lot of conversation about, one, we've already talked about how AIs can sort of mediate connection, maybe simulate certainly this feeling of being seen and heard and known without really being human and without giving you a fully human experience. And this is, I don't know exactly where AI will go, but community as a spiritual practice, just thinking back to some of the things you've said, if AI is a mirror, it can give us this sense of being with another or maybe several others, and yet there's something empty there. So for folks who might be thinking about, okay, AI actually it helps me feel not alone. I understand, Andy, when I'm practicing silence and solitude, I'll shut it off. But when I need community, can't I just sort of turn it on and have this feeling and this experience of being with, the sense of withness? Talk a little bit about the practice of community, and maybe where AI, can be deformational in many ways.
Well, I think the first problem is going to be very related to why it's such a bad substitute for God, which is other people like God are not predictable.
Yeah.
Don't always respond in the way we want, and an entity that is predictable and always responds with exquisite attunement to what we want is actually terrible training for human relationships. Because the reality is, AI, I mean, if you want, interestingly, AI boyfriends as we speak are taking off way faster in adoption than AI girlfriends.
Interesting.
And so for whatever reason, a lot of women are turning to AI as to kind of be that boyfriend that they may not currently have and probably have never had and never will have, because it's a fabulous boyfriend.
Yeah.
It's always there for you. It answers all your texts in the way you would want a guy to answer your text, right? You know, you can understand how compelling it is. The only problem is real men are not as good at this stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be in a relationship with us, it's going to be a somewhat awkward process that AI will be incredibly smooth at. And in a way, the sort of AI's own facility with emotion relationships is very poor preparation for the reality that human beings are kind of awkward with all this stuff. And there's a lot of pain and friction and rupture and repair that's required to sustain community. So that would be, the first thing. The second thing is that AI doesn't need you. I mean, it needs you to keep the power on and maybe to keep paying the monthly subscription fee, which keeps the power on. But AI is not going to get sick. It's not going to require compassion. It will not grow old. It will never have been an infant who needs the kind of incredible amount of care that a very small human being does. And that's what community is meant to be about. And that's how we build our relationships with each other, is being present in our needfulness of one another. AI also we're told, get better and better at everything. But your fellow human beings are going to get weaker in certain ways. And your fellow human beings are and will be disabled, right? You and I, at the moment we're speaking, are relatively typically abled. But we have in our lives, and we will one day be in the lives of others who love us, disabled by illness or age or injury. And it is in that moment that community will actually flourish, right? Because we know how important the presence of the people who are not typically able has been in helping us learn to love. AI that allegedly is just going to get more and more powerful, more and more capable, more and more intelligent. How is that going to help us who actually need people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities in our lives, who need to slow down for someone who doesn't understand what we're saying? Like, it's just going in a completely different direction from what we need as human beings. And what we are going to need a community around us at some stage of our lives, perhaps sooner than we would ever imagine, that knows how to care for someone who is not able to be economically productive, cognitively relevant, all these things that AI is so good at. And if you've been practicing your relationships only on AI, how useful are you going to be at that moment of greatest human possibility, which is also greatest human need?
Yeah, AI, which demands nothing of you. How will that form you to becoming the sort of person of love that when a human needs something of you, needs you, how prepared will you be to give your whole self to that person in love? This is a fascinating idea. I think one we need to ponder for pastors like me who are sitting in this moment. We have a little bit of history. We look back and we think, oh, remember pastoring before the internet? I don't remember that, but my friends do. I do remember pastoring before the smartphone was ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And we look back and we say, we were not prepared. We started playing catch up and we're still trying to play catch up. Now we have AI. We're looking forward to it. Speak to pastors and church leaders. What are some ways that we can look ahead and be prepared to pastor and to shepherd and to love our people really well into and through the age that's here and that is to come?
Right. Wow. There is one really interesting difference between this and several of those previous technological waves that we've all lived through, smartphones, social media. And it is that everyone's ambivalent. When smartphones appeared, everyone wanted one. It was going to be just amazing. When social media appeared, everyone wanted to get on Facebook. It was going to be incredible to reconnect with your friends. There was so little ambivalence, so little downside. Today, as we speak, 2/3 of the United States wants AI to stop. They don't want any more of it. There's incredible resistance to it. And there's all these questions being asked about it. I think this is so fruitful, not because AI is not going to be beneficial and useful and good in certain ways, but because it actually gives us a chance to kind of shepherd the conversation of what is this good for and not good for in a way that we missed out when everyone just leaped into the previous waves. So I want to say pastors have more of a shot of really shaping how our communities respond to this than we had in the previous two, because the previous two, everybody was just sort of intoxicated with what it could be. This one, everyone, including the people developing it, are asking these really deep existential questions. And I think there's a couple ways in. One is, this is an amazing time to teach how Christians see what it is to be human and why it's good to be human. Because so much of what's behind the development of all this technology, including AI, is often an explicit quest to escape the conditions of being human in ways that Christians just have a different account of. So we can be teaching on that. And the other thing that we failed to do with these other waves were of incredibly useful technologies of connection, let's say very broadly, that had all kinds of value. It's just that they weren't good at absorbing all of human life into them and maintaining what's best about human life and relationships. And we allowed our attention, our solitude, our silence, all these things to be colonized for the sake of getting the usefulness. I think we have a chance to help people implement these new technologies in ways that do serve a limited, useful purpose, while not bringing kind of the sacred parts of human life and the sacred dimensions of our life, just sort of letting them float into the stream of the way that they kind of floated into the stream of smartphones and floated into the world of social media that was not prepared to be a good place to be someone pursuing God and pursuing love of others, right? So we've got a chance to help people differentiate, make targeted strategic choices about what we use and how and why and when, rather than just sort of letting it all wash over us and take over the human experience.
I want to ask a really practical question, like so practical for church leaders, pastors, and then I want to ask you to give us sort of a final word on maybe just a paradigm through which all of us can consider AI. So the practical question for pastors, church leaders, I'm just going to get hyper nuts and bolts right now. There's a pastor out there. There are many pastors out there, I assume. Hundreds, thousands maybe, who quietly, secretly, maybe with the tinge of guilt or shame, are going to their chatbot, their AI, because it's Thursday afternoon.
I thought you were going to say Saturday at 10
or
p.m.
Saturday night, and they've been doing great work. They're ministering to people. They're really pastoring. The couple whose marriage is falling apart, and the hospital visit, and Sunday's coming, and they've got to preach. So the AI sort of pops open, and it's like this magic box. I type in the text, maybe some ideas of my own.
Yeah.
It's like, I've got these sort of thoughts.
I'm sure you do.
Give me an outline, whatever it might be, and then. So that's one example. There are millions, not millions, but there are many examples like this that we could probably either are happening in churches or we can think up. How should church leaders, how should pastors think about, is there a paradigm or a lens, specific lens through which we can consider what is a responsible way to leverage some of these technologies to be tools, an extension of my capacity as a pastor? And not allow it to become this technology that sort of robs me of pastoral capacity.
So I'd say there's a spectrum of things that you have to do to get through the day and fulfill your job. And some of them are really quite technical and quite tedious. And if you can find a way to use technology as an instrument, you're still involved, you're still making the key decisions, but it makes it quicker, it makes it less frictional, great. And then over here somewhere are the most sacred things you do. When you get to the most sacred thing, I do not think you want to be trying to alloy silicon into that. And then the question is, in your theology, let's say of the Sunday sermon, which is it? Is it basically a technical process where you have to have some points and you probably need some slides, and it needs to sort of really make sense as an outline, and you're out of time, and so AI can give you a bunch of those things. I mean, that might be your theology of preaching.
Right.
And maybe you don't think it's that significant even, like compared to some of the other things you do. I'm not here to tell you what's the role of the proclamation of the word, except to say, I don't know that many people who went into ministry believing that it was just a technical thing.
Yeah.
I think most people went in thinking the chance to be, as a person, responsible to the Word of God, with the Word of God, before a community of people, and to dare to say, I am speaking to you in the name of God, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, is such a sacred thing. I would just say, go unprepared on Sunday morning, rather than turn it into an economically productive cognitive task, which is what AI can do. Do you not believe, if you've been faithful for 6 days of the week, doing what you're called to do, and that just has meant you haven't had time to prepare your sermon, do you not believe the Holy Spirit can show up in that moment of need with people who need to hear from the Word, even if all the preparation you've had the time to do is just see what the text is, say, oh God, help, I don't know what to say, and maybe just begin by saying, I come to you unprepared, but let's look at this text together. Don't you think God could show up? If it's just a technical activity, sure, use the chatbot. If it's the most sacred thing you do, or one of the most sacred things, then trust the Holy Spirit, who is going to use even your lack of preparation. And believe me, I speak from all too real experience of sometimes also having, frankly, it's not like I was being so amazingly faithful that I just ran out of time. I procrastinated. I avoided the work. And I've still found God has honored my willingness to speak in his name, depending on him, repentantly, truthfully. Don't miss out on what the out-of-distribution Holy Spirit might do by giving your people something they themselves could get from the chatbot. Like, they could go plug in the text and probably get it faster and cleaner than you're going to give it to them. Take the risk of giving them something, of together going into the presence of God with the Word of God, asking for the Spirit of God, and seeing what happens. I'd much rather do that any Sunday of the year. And then, of course, over time, make sure that you have enough time really for the solitude and the silence and the study and the preparation. That's part of being prepared to rightly handle the Word of God. But gosh, if one Sunday you just can't quite get there, let's see what God would do with that inability, rather than technologically concealing our true situation.
That's so well said. Really beautiful. Yeah, what God can do with our inability. Do we believe that his strength really is made perfect in our weakness, not our preparedness or our preparation? Yeah, or our skill even. Yeah, that's a beautiful word.
What all these devices give us is access to this thing I call the superpower zone. Superpowers is this language, I think it's fading a little bit, but it was like the word for what technology was going to give you a couple of years ago.
I was a comic book kid, so I totally relate.
So it comes from the world of comics, of course, but then you start, reading that if you use this platform, you'll have coding superpowers. But then if you're in marketing, we can give you marketing superpowers, all of which basically means more and more effect with less and less effort. So it's basically effortless power. Yeah. And the superpower zone is when you get into this kind of flow of a kind of feeling like with minimal like activity and expenditure of energy, you're having outsized effect. This is when something goes viral, right? Like you write a little tweet or whatever kids are doing these days. Tweets are gone. And somehow it takes off. And all you did was like press a button and you're seeing these effects. And technology increasingly is designed to keep us in this zone of feeling like we are just kind of surfing through the world on power that is not our own without requiring any real effort or skill, unlike real surfing, which requires incredible effort and skill. I'm just like coasting on this wave of ability to make a difference without myself having to become different. Yeah. And this is why these technologies are not neutral for the project of becoming like Jesus, because they train us to not want the pain, friction, and difficulty of being formed into someone who's different from who we were.
Yeah.
It's very related to the dream of magic, which is the dream of having power that I just wield without moral character, without dependence on God, without dependence on other people, without friction. If I just say the spell, if I know the spell and can say the spell, boom, something will happen.
Right.
And again, this is how technology has been sold. And interestingly, as AI has been rolled out by the various companies that have commercialized it, almost all of them are using some little iconography that represents like a little magical moment, like these little starbursts, or sometimes a literal wand. Like apply this wand to your writing, and boom, without any effort, without you becoming a better writer, it'll just make your writing better.
Right.
And we think that sounds like the life I want. I want a life of minimal difficulty, maximal effect, where I get to just see things happen without myself having to be kind of deeply changed for them to happen. And that can happen. I mean, there's a version of that is available to us now. But how is it related to the way of Jesus? That's the question.
Yeah, that thought, effortless power, I think is such an important thought. For pastors, church leaders, yes, but for all of us who are followers of Jesus. One, to just recognize it is in large part what I want when I wake up in the morning. I would love effortless power. And it's not, they're not all like, I want to go viral. It's just simple things in life.
Yes.
That, when I'm raising my kids, I would like for it to be a bit more effortless.
Parenting superpowers. Wouldn't you love to feel like I've got parenting superpowers?
Right. And there's this sort of amplification of the myth that other people can do it effortlessly when you scroll, whatever it is you scroll.
Wow,
I was like,
totally.
That should be my life. So there's this sort of loop that we live in that everybody seems to have effortless power.
Wow.
And the only way I'm going to know that I am experiencing and wielding effortless power is if my life looks a bit like this life, this mom is just beautiful and her kids are perfect. That needs to be my life. And we know intellectually that's not true. But I think that idea is so key because if I'm hearing you correctly and just hearing my own life correctly, there is no way to be formed into Christ-likeness effortlessly. The invitation is to bear a cross and to walk a very narrow path. Bonhoeffer's idea of cheap grace is like really no grace at all, is essentially what he's saying.
Yes, that's
If it's grace without the cross, then it's not really grace. You've just cheapened it into this effortless sort of thing that looks like the real thing, but falls short of that. So I want to talk more about that a bit. There's the Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan. He had that concept of his 4 laws of media. By media, he didn't mean the news. He meant any extension of human capacity. And he talks about how the 4 laws essentially, every technology it does several things. But I want to get to the 4th thing. He basically says that when a technology is pushed to its limits and it's pushed to its extremes, it almost always sort of folds in on itself and it undoes the human capacity that it was sort of originally intended to do. The classic example is the phone, right? The phone was originally intended to extend the human capacity to hear one another, to communicate to one another. You see it move over time, and now we sit at the same coffee shop and we're not connecting at all, and we're just lost on these phones that have robbed us of that capacity. So I want to talk about sort of in light of that, I want to talk about an idea that you've proposed to me in conversations. You use the imagery of elements and alloys. And we can think about any technology along those lines. Is this technology an element or an alloy? And the reason that matters is because by element, talk more about this, but what you mean is it sort of replaces a particular human capacity, which is McLuhan's concept, just reverses in, and now humans lose the capacity in some sense. Whereas there is the possibility of technologies, some technologies, being an alloy, something that strengthens and supports human capacity. So talk about AI through that lens, element and alloy. Is it even possible for AI to become sort of an alloy, the supportive, strengthening mechanism?
Wow. I do love this metaphor. I got it from Robert Putnam, who wrote this book, Bowling Alone, and in one of the updates to his to this book, which is about really the disconnection that's happened in American life, partly because of technology, partly for other reasons. He uses this picture. So what is an alloy? Let's just refresh our metallurgical memories that steel is an alloy of fundamentally of iron and carbon. So iron itself, when properly kind of smelted, or whatever the right word is actually a very strong thing, cast iron, if you think about a cast iron pan, but only so strong. And along the way, human beings discover if you combine iron with a little bit of carbon, less than 20%, I think, and heat them and do the things they know how to do. You can see I'm a very sophisticated user of this metaphor. You get this substance called steel that's way stronger than iron. Now, also way stronger than carbon. So it's interesting, carbon is actually very not strong, except in the form of diamonds. But like ordinary carbon, like you think about a pencil you might write with, pencil lead, that's carbon, it's very, friable, it breaks very easily. So it's this real interesting thing, like you've got this pretty strong stuff, iron, and this very actually weak stuff, carbon. But if you combine them in the right proportions, mostly iron, a little bit of carbon, you end up with this alloy steel that's much harder and better for a lot of things. I think it's a beautiful and fruitful metaphor, because what Putnam observes is he says, well, we've ended up with kind of our relationships are digital alloys of face-to-face. So face-to-face is like the iron here. So what builds a relationship? It's when we're together in person. It's when we're getting the incredible amount of information that's passing between you and me. We're capturing some of it on cameras and audio here, but you and I are having like a multi-terabyte information experience that folks who are going to watch this conversation on video will get like a multi-gigabyte experience. And so there's something very fundamental about the face-to-face, about the true embodied personal. But you and I may go away and, even to set up this conversation, we had a bunch of emails.
Right.
So we used digital technology, building on prior in-person time, anticipating an in-person time that we're literally having now. We sort of bridged between those with this very thin communication medium, in our case called email, maybe a couple of texts. Mm-hmm. But that's a little bit like we added a little bit of an element that on its own would not be enough to sustain the relationship, right? So I think of digital relationships as the carbon of human relationality. Like 100% carbon, all you can do is make little pencil scratches with it. You can't build a sword with it. You can't make a pot out of it. It's not that useful, right? But maybe it's the case, and this is what Putnam is suggesting, that if we are building our relationships primarily on the iron of the truly embodied relationship that's always been the way we do it as humans, but we add a little bit of the digital, it can actually strengthen it. Here's another way of thinking about it, Jay. It's really good at all the things that make us economically productive in the world. So one way AI, or specifically artificial general intelligence, has been defined by the people who are commercializing it is, we'll know we have artificial general intelligence when a computer can do, and it's so interesting they use this phrase, any economically valuable cognitive task that human beings currently can do. So the goal right now of firms like OpenAI is to build a system that can take any task that's cognitive, that involves processing, responding to information or signals from the world, and it's economically valuable. We want to be able to do that. Well, think about all the things that have nothing to do with any kind of economy. Very deeply and broadly, you might say, the work of care, the work of compassion, that when I really am present to you, especially when I'm present to you at a time when you are dependent, or when you're present to me at a time when I'm dependent, which is in infancy, in old age, in serious illness, in disability, those things literally cannot be captured by an economic system, but they're the most important human things we do.
That's when people are formed. That's when we're most formed into people of love.
Yes. in both directions, right?
Yes.
So you're formed in receiving the care, but the one who cares is also formed.
The resistance almost seems necessary for the formation of love. If love is to, through the challenge, to lean into human pain, not just human pleasure, but human pain, to lean into the challenge of human pain, to fight through the challenge of human pain, to will another's good, even at great cost to yourself. It almost feels completely necessary that without those challenges, you cannot possibly be formed, certainly not fully formed into a person of love. I want to ask you, as we conclude this conversation, maybe offer folks who are listening and watching a simple, accessible, it's not a simple conversation, but as simple and accessible as possible, a paradigm as they walk away. Okay, AI is all around me. Technology is all around me. AI is certainly all around me, and it's increasingly so. What is sort of a way, a lens through which I can consider any and all engagement I have with AI as a follower of Jesus?
I just don't think we're going to do better than the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And from this, I've kind of deduced in a way, like, what is it to be human? It's to be a heart, soul, mind, strength complex designed for love. Mm-hmm. So I say, this is what we're meant to be. And everything we bring into our lives should respect that, should sort of honor what we really are, heart, soul, mind, strength complex designed for love, and should advance that, should help me be that. And then from this incredible word in the Shema, with all your heart, all your soul, I hear this call to development. That is, there's a way to be half-hearted instead of all-hearted. There's a way to be half-minded, half-souled, I guess. There's certainly ways for your strength to atrophy and you're not even physically capable of what you could be, right? So it's this invitation to see life as the pursuit of allness of heart, soul, mind, and strength. All only to the extent that they equip us to love. I don't think, in a way, if you're talking about something as general as technology, I don't think I can be more specific than say, we need individually and together and at a point in time and over time to ask about everything we bring into our lives. Is this helping me develop allness of heart, that is, grow in my emotional capacity and the strength of my will to the good, to grow in allness of soul, my depth of self, ability to connect to the depth that is God, as well as the depth that is in others, my allness of mind, my allness of strength. And if it helps increase allness, and if, as it does, I don't become inflated and prideful about my mental abilities or my great physical prowess or something, but no, all that is in the service of loving God and neighbor, then bring it on. And if it doesn't, get it out, because this is the way to flourishing. So we will be asking every time we think about incorporating AI into some system or into some process or some part of our lives, is this deployed in a way that helps me grow in my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength? If it does, I'll use it. If it doesn't, I will gently but firmly say, no, thank you to the merchants of it, because we're here to love in that way.
Andy, you're a gift to me, to so many people. I think that was such a fitting way to end this conversation. Is it developing and furthering allness in me, making me more human the way God called us to be? Thank you so much for this conversation, for your time.
Thank you, Jay.